and I hope that you enjoy giving your presentation. Cool enough. All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Nick. I have been with Seawatch since the end of 2015. Back then, we were still very small. Maybe we can go on to the next slide, 2015. It all started with on the anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, where people from Berlin got together and thought about what the borders in Europe looked like. The concrete situation in 2015 being that after the Arab Spring, the situation in Libya was such that there was no Gaddafi anymore who could control the Libyan border. So boat people started emerging. In other words, people started trying to go to Lampedusa, to Italy, to Europe via this very dangerous sea route. Back then, the Italian government responded with the so-called Mission Mare Nostrum. It was a military operation financed and managed by Italy, whose job was to execute sea rescue. So they did that. They patrolled the waters of Libya, which had two upshots. First of all, the costs of the mission were pretty high, but also, according to the Dublin Agreement, which expected refugees stepping on European soil having to ask for asylum status in the country they first enter. And so Italy was in a situation that they had to take care of all the people they had rescued. There were several requests to the European Union, which ignored it, and the upshot was that Italy said we can't handle this anymore, and they stopped this Operation Mare Nostrum, which led to 100 deaths, and we said we couldn't simply watch that. We said we'll have to do this, so we purchased a houseboat or a boat that had been used as a houseboat in Holland, and our idea was to be a phone booth. So what we did originally, we didn't want to respond with our own rescue mission, but with our Operation Triton, which was designed to fight smugglers, but without active sea rescue. So if anybody, if a boat was notified to them or people were notified to Triton, then they went there and rescued them. So that was the idea, that there was a pull factor, that if we rescue people, that more and more would come. And that was supposed to be prevented there. So we can see more than 100 people here with Sea-Watch 1. This shows that this didn't happen. The pull factor didn't apply, so the situation became untenable. So the mission of Sea-Watch is, of course, sea rescue, as you can see on the left-hand side, which means operating the ships, of course, then the actual rescue, the management around it, but then also, and that was becoming ever more evident over the last few years, was the political side and the media aspect. So raising the alarm, making people aware of what's happening here. So there is a militia financed by the Italian Coast Guard, who are paid for doing the dirty work, sometimes even beating people up to stop them from coming to Europe. And the map shows that this has an historic dimension. The EU doesn't have an interest in documenting this. We're on site, and so we see it as our job to document this with Zarkev, to document this much better. Well then, this is Sea-Watch 2022. We actually group it, so from an NGO that was started by a few private individuals, There were 10 of them in the association. When I joined, there were more than 50 members now, more than 100 full-time equivalents. We have two boats. We registered ours as a sports vessel, and the Dutch government changed the registration legislation because of us. So now we fly the German flag. We have airplanes for reconnaissance. So our ships are impounded again and again because we have too many life vests on board, because they argue you have too many life vests. That means you're planning to rescue people and you're not licensed for that. So we hope to at least be able to document what's happening, and we were able to show that way, or create a correlation that if Frontex fly, that the Libyan Coast Guard then goes out. So there's illegal cooperation between Libyan militia and the European Coast Guard forces. And then finally, all that's behind it, the office and organization. We have different offices. The biggest one in Berlin, where we have the largest number of staff. Then we have an events team, because Sea-Watch is represented at different events, such as this one here. That was a short introduction into Sea-Watch, and I would like to give the floor to Felix. Well, thank you very much. The presentation is called Digital Sovereignty for Civil Sea Rescue. And Peter, in his keynote, already explained why digital sovereignty is so necessary and what it enables. The term digital sovereignty has been much discussed in the media over the last few years, but what does it mean? How is it composed? There are 4 dimensions of digital sovereignty. Let's start with the legal dimension. That's GDPR conformity, so that the data of staff are secure and cannot be switched off, or systems can be simply switched off because they are operating in a jurisdiction that allows for it. Then we have freedom of decision, i.e. a platform must allow us to well, I have a problem with the microphone here. So a platform must allow us to take out the data and to put them somewhere else. So we need open interfaces, open standards. The technological dimension is the use of open source, so that we use software that we can handle, that we can open, that we can modify. And finally, the dimension of competence, because what does software allow us to do if we can't operate it, if we can't run it? So what's important for digital sovereignty is not only to have sovereignty, but also to be able to handle it. And I think Mareike will tell us something about our IT team. Well, thank you very much, Philip and Nick. I'll speak about the IT team of Sea-Watch and what we do. As you said, the IT team started small with the small organization. Back then, we only were 2 volunteers, and it all started with a request to improve the website. You can see on the very left, the first website still developed without an IT team. Then in the center, November 2015, the website that the first IT team had improved a bit. And on the far right, we can see our current website. And I can tell you at this stage already that we are already in the process of redesigning our website, which will go online about 6 months from now. And an important feature will be that it will be available in dark mode as well. So much on the evolution of the website. But what was also important was the tools being made available for collaborative cooperation. That was very important. Back then, collaborative cooperation was handled via Facebook groups, Google Drive, and there were mail accounts in a web hosting contract. as the organization grew so fast, the number of users grew correspondingly fast, which led to a lot of administrative effort. We had an extra account per user with all these providers, and it was a huge management effort. On top of that, digital sovereignty became ever more important for our work. Due to increasing criminalization of sea rescue, we became more sensitized concerning the security of our data. And here the legal dimension of digital sovereignty that Felix mentioned came into play. So a number of products were no longer useful for us because they would allow for data to be tapped into. There was also the risk that the Italian state or Savini might switch off our systems so that we couldn't communicate with our ships at sea anymore. So we opted for UCS at the time, together with Nextcloud and OX, self-hosted. And the focus for us from day one was on data privacy and security, open source, and here the dimension of competence with a view to digital sovereignty becomes relevant. We have the great fortune that we have numerous different competencies and abilities available due to the number of volunteers we have, leading to maximum independence and sustainability with our systems. By now, our IT team has grown, particularly over the last year and a half. It has mushroomed, and it now has about 15 to 20 people who are more or less active. There are still numerous volunteers, such as Nick and Felix, but there are also 3 full-time employees for the ships, so that the IT systems on the ships can be continuously maintained and are always available. And I also have a 20-hour job as a coordinator. And there is the first in-house software project, the Crewing DB, which I can only mention here. I can't go into detail for lack of time. And by way of conclusion, I would like to speak about the ship IT, because that is what Sea-Watch does, operate ships. At every mission, we have an IT person on board who is responsible for achieving that IT is operating video, satellite, CCTV, then ship tracking, but also voice over IP, and mail works on ship. And mail is very important because that's our communication channel with the authorities, the Italian or Maltese authorities, for instance. We have, as I said, ship tracking via AIS and recording of some wireless conversations, and we use voice over IP and open WRT to just give you a few buzzwords, and then I'll give the floor back to Felix. Thank you. Well, we are in the UCS technical track, and I would like to take you on a journey to our data center, what we are building there with UCS, and how UCS is actually the backbone and the core of Sea-Watch IT. Up until about half a year ago, 3/4 of a year ago, we had single sign-on, but by now it's a Proxmox cluster with 3 nodes on which we run UCS. UCS is the core system. We have primary and replica, and they provide primary services, i.e. Ox, Nextcloud, only Office comes from there. We have another few services such as Redution, Wiki, and other things that we allow to operate, run in parallel as UCL add-ons. All the others handle authentication via LDAP 1, as we know from history. So the Proximus cluster is really quite big, and that takes us to a number of challenges in the IT team. For one thing, and I won't tell you anything new, you do need a lot of specialized knowledge if you want to work with a UCS system. I went through this 10 years ago when I first used the UCS system. When I thought, okay, I know Linux, no problem, can handle it. Then I went there and really stumbled because, yes, it's a Linux system, but due to the things that are possible with the UCS, a lot of things are different than you would know from a standard Linux. So you really know how things work in a UCS world. The integration of applications with UCS through single server installation is extra difficult for us because we can't simply um, use individual services, and we have a lot of volunteers, as has been said already, and there's a certain fluctuation of personnel. Some volunteers come, others leave, some volunteers stay, and a system that's a few years old, that's seen a few different volunteers working on it, has its problems, and of course we would like to automate as much as we can. So we're defining the new CBIT and to move there. So we say UCS continues to be the backbone and the core of everything. We want to move away from LDAP that we use a lot towards Keycloak, as has been mentioned before, for identification, thus taking the services out a bit and use UCS as central IAM, Open ID Connect, and via micro VMs and containers, possibly Podman. We might go into the direction of having easier maintenance, easier operations, so that volunteers who join us can handle this system without knowing the overall system, and that makes it easier to scale down the system. And as we speak of automation, of course, obviously Terraform to build certain things, infrastructure as code. Then Hesna Cloud, Proxmox is an excellent provider for this. Cloud in it, and you see some repo if you look in the UCS world. Well, that takes me then to digital sovereignty is not only necessary for us, but also very well to implement with the right ingredients. And UCS is the concomitant ecosystem on excellent technological basis. And this takes us to the point where we would like to thank you. The three of us are only standing here on behalf of the entire IT team, without which there would be no IT at Seawatch. Where we're actually doing volunteer work with passion. Yes, and then of course there are numerous manufacturers who support us, or vendors who support us, which we should mention today, either by providing free support or rebates on subscriptions, etc. So there's a lot of support by the OEMs, which is really great for us. Well then, I would like to thank you for your attention.